I'll introduce you. Hi, I'm Hal. This is our Harrowings podcast, and we're with Sophie Burnham once again. We've been talking a little bit about the idea of pronoia because Sophie, just back from Egypt, just back from a knee replacement, is working on a new book. So, Sophie, over to you. You want to talk a little bit about any of it that we've been going into?
Well, we were talking about this word that I had never heard of before called
Pronoia, right?
pronoia, the opposite of paranoia.
Paranoia. Yeah, paranoia, because it's, the paranoid kind of feeling that the universe is a conspiracy, but if it's in your favor, it's pronoia. Yeah.
That's right. Well, I am intensely optimistic and even about paranoia. I'm optimistic as I look at a few days ago, we bombed Iran. And I opened the paper and saw that, and I was just sick to my stomach that once again the United States should have gotten ourselves into another war. And if you look around, you see that all over this planet, there's war and suffering and starvation and disaster. We don't even have to wait for mudslides and avalanches
Yeah.
to find dreadful things. And so I've been asking myself, how can I be optimistic in this? It isn't a matter of being optimistic. I have to say, I have had so many personal experiences of
Yes.
angels and of small miracles happening in my favor. I'll tell you a story, for example, and even skeptics will not be able to figure this one out. I had gone to London, and when I got to London, I discovered I'd forgotten the charge to my cell phone. My cell phone, no charge. It's black. I'm in London for 3 or 4 days, and I cannot find another charger. And then I'm supposed to go to Paris. So I'm on the Channel
Mhm.
train to Paris, underwater, however many tons of water are above us as we go in that tunnel under the sleeve of the English Channel. And I suddenly realize, my God, when I get to Paris, it's going to be almost midnight. I don't have the code to the outside door of the apartment where I'm staying. I can get
Oh, my.
into the apartment, but I can't get into the outside door. And I hardly had this thought when my phone rings, the phone that has been dead for 3 days. And it's the caretaker saying, it suddenly occurred to me you don't have the code to the outside door. Here it is. Gave me the code, and the cell phone went dead again.
Oh.
Now, I know that skeptics can say, well, there was a little bit of charge on your phone, enough to take a message. I don't believe it for a minute because for 4 days I hadn't had a telephone call or been able to make one.
Wow.
But that is what I mean about the universe, angels,
Mm.
whatever you want to talk about it, being on our side. And I've come to completely trust it. Does that mean that I'm so special that I'm not going to suffer? No, no. So, what do you think, Hal?
Well, so I'm
I'm
interested
going
in
to
that
throw it to
because
you for a minute.
the thing is that I do feel that when I think about somebody and suddenly they're there, or they get a call from me, or they've been thinking about me just as we get back into touch.
Yeah,
It's happened to me a lot that I'm thinking about somebody else when
when they
then
call.
they just become available to me. And it does feel like this. I don't know. And I have this feeling of when I get the feeling that getting the universe on my side, that things are falling my way. I just think I'm lucky. I just think I'm really fortunate. And I begin to believe that I'm lucky because I am lucky because I believe I'm lucky. That's the way I wanted to put it, right? It's in my mindset. It's in what I'm looking for. It's in that pattern recognition that as primates, we have to have the ability to recognize patterns in our immediate environment in order to function. We filter a lot too. So I don't know. It's all in my perspective. That's what I would say. And I like to have the perspective of a positive outcome and that to question the will of the universe and the angels that watch over us is something that I try not to do too much. You know what I mean? To take it on faith that
Just don't
these
think
angels
about it.
exist. You probably saw, I'm sure you must have gotten involved, maybe you were personally involved in Wings of Desire. I don't know. You know, the film with
Oh, I
Wim
love that
Wenders?
movie. Yeah, I love that movie.
And I think of
I
the angels
love
like that. How do you see it?
I love the fact that they cannot interfere with our free will.
Right.
And if someone comes tearing at you with a knife, or some president somewhere decides to make war,
Hmm.
he can do it. The angels will warm and comfort and bring the surgeon quickly and guide the surgeon's hand in healing the wound that the
There you go.
attacker gave, but they can't interfere with the attacker's free will. They can nudge the dagger away a little bit, or perhaps interfere with a gunshot. That happens too. But we're thinking about a larger picture.
Okay.
Um, it's my feeling that we come down here as spirits, and we
Yes.
are beings of light living inside physical bodies. The physical body is a self-healing organism, fortunately. We don't have to think about healing it when we get a cut. It just heals itself. We live inside this little thing, and we are beings of light having the experience of the physical laws of the universe, not of the spiritual laws of the universe, but the physical laws of the universe. And this experience involves suffering. We're in a
Oh, yes.
school of suffering in order to learn compassion and also to learn who we are really deeply as beings of light, in which case we draw to us, as you had said, these moments with with the light, with God, if you will, the
Mm.
universe, angels.
Right.
But then you hear of 123 little children being bombed by the
Right.
Americans.
Or more.
What about those little children? Didn't they have angels? Yes, they did. And the answer lies in the fact that I think there's no death. They go back to being the beings of light on the other side, with complete with their personalities. They have a choice later of coming back to this planet of suffering in case they wanted to experience it again. And
Yeah.
there are some of us who see this whole pattern and understand, I don't know, what we're supposed to be doing here. To understand it's very, very large, and it's very much against our ideas It's my belief that we're supposed to enjoy this world, every single bit of the banquet, all of it, including eat the suffering, eat the loneliness,
Right.
eat the because we these are experiences that we need to have in order to love more deeply. And we
That's
come
true.
down here in order to love more deeply, to forgive, and to understand the game of it all. How, when there's no death, if we actually understood there's no death, we'd all fly into death by suicide and drownings ourselves and killing ourselves
I don't
because
know if that's
it's so
true, but
much.
it depends on whether you're really enjoying your life or not, whether you want to take yourself out in the bargain because you want to return to that state of bliss. Is that the idea?
Well, maybe that's what we would know if we actually understood it. But I
Hmm.
had a brother-in-law who committed suicide. It's a dreadful, dreadful thing. And it passes on generation and generation
Yes.
like ripples.
Yes.
And he was hurting so badly
Hmm.
with a disease that we call depression,
Right.
so badly that he didn't have a choice in it.
Well,
It
right.
wasn't
Actually,
that all he wanted was to have no pain.
the writer David Foster Wallace, his mother said almost exactly the same things to a writer who did a book called Capture. His name is not going to come back to me right now, but it was about the idea that people can be captured by this kind of disease of depression. And in her view, it was like staying in a building on fire or jumping. And so
Mhm.
he jumped. He had gotten
David
the
David
Pale King.
Wallace
Yeah.
David Wallace had this same disease.
Yes,
He's a
exactly.
wonderful writer.
And The Pale King was all ready for publication on his desk when he hung himself in his writing studio or wherever it was. I think it was sort of a detached garage thing. But the point being that so many do that. I mean, have a personal friend. I think you knew Ben, who hung
Yeah.
himself.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I used to make myself late for work every morning, hanging out with Ben, talking about everything. And then, the day after his burial, I was there at the Oak Hill Cemetery and a fawn or doe walked by the grave, and I had located it. It wasn't yet marked, but I've been back since. I go back fairly frequently, and I don't begrudge him that. When I heard that he had killed himself, I was like, okay, well, where are we today? And
Yeah,
it just didn't shock me too much. And because, of course, I don't see death as the end. As you said, there really is no death. I
I think
think
the
there
fawn
was a
was there.
line that Mary Todd Lincoln says in the Lincoln and God play by my friend who was my landlord for a while. I don't know if you knew Tony Gallo
Oh,
by any
yes, I
chance.
do. Hmm.
Okay. He had a play called Lincoln and God in which Mary Todd Lincoln intones that there is no death as they're having seances to try to get in touch with the spirit of her dead son.
Hmm.
There's so many examples in art and literature of this, and it can be a great healer, I think. Art, literature, music, those are the things I go to, and I try to amplify into the consciousness of everybody around me. Another thing you probably are familiar with is a book called The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. Do you know that one?
I've never read it.
Never. I recommend it if you get a chance. I don't know how much time you have to read while you're writing books, but it's worth the price of admission. A friend of mine passed away of lung cancer shortly thereafter. He didn't know he had it when he turned me on to it, but a guy named Jim Wooten.
Was it denied death?
Yeah, no. The thing is he says that what we do here on Earth is we're in terror of the fact we're mortal at some level.
Hmm.
Not everyone. Now, you may have transcended that terror, but terror management was one of the things he
Yeah.
talked about. He was described as a cultural anthropologist, but I think really had most of his work in psychology. And the idea is that we have these immortality projects we invest ourselves in
Hmm.
because we know we are mortal.
That's right.
And we have these heroes' journeys, these heroic efforts to make this have meaning and purpose. in our lives. And you probably saw the film Spellbound with Gregory Peck and Ingrid Bergman,
No.
Alfred Hitchcock film from way
Oh,
back. Salvador Dali did some of the decoration for it. But anyway, so the point is they go to a psychologist, the mentor for Ingrid Bergman's character, who was a psychiatrist, because Gregory Peck has amnesia. He had been posing as a psychiatrist going into a sanitarium. So I'm ruining the movie. But Bruloff, the psychiatrist, says all the problems of the world are created by old people. They got nothing else to get excited about. So they're starting these wars and that type of thing. In 1941, Hitchcock. But you get the point. We've talked about the war, being sick to our stomachs about it,
yeah.
trying to make how does this make sense? And maybe we'll
How
bring
can
that
there
back full
be
circle.
a loving God if there's evil in the world? And and that's the question that has been around since long before Job answered it. And Job doesn't answer the question anyway. He just says, "You don't know enough," says God. You're not
Yes,
looking enough.
exactly. Storms at him out of the whirlwind, correct?
Yeah. But I think that we're supposed to experience pain and
Mm.
difficulty, challenges and suffering. And every time you think that our world is getting better, and it is getting better, it is much better than it was 500 years ago. It is much better than it was even 200 years ago. For
Mhm.
example, now the whole world has a UN, and we are shocked by not upholding international law. And yet, 100 years ago, there was no international law.
Or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which we quite
And
often go to.
yeah, and so we're really, really developing. We believe there is a right to health, a right to food. These are tremendous ideas that have never been in the world before. And
Mm.
we extend our compassion to other countries where we don't even live and say they have a right to. So I can see that we're evolving and developing. And then you go back to the old ways. And it's all governed by fear. I'm not sure that it's fear of death. Sometimes it's fear of prison. But there's something that creates this ignorance. And I think it's just ignorance. It can
That's a good way of
be,
putting it.
it can be malicious, but rarely is it really, really deeply malicious. I think ignorance is more to the point.
A belief in being right. I think
If
that
I
is
do
definitely there.
this, we'll be better off. If I do this, they'll forget about such and such. If I do this, we'll have the oil fields and be richer.
Mm.
I mean, it's always some kind of effort to make yourself bigger, better, wiser, richer, whatever. And
Inflation. Yeah.
of course, I also include in that all of the billionaires who have bought our Congress and our system
Yeah.
and forget what they're on earth to do. Help other
Yes.
people. They're given money, help other people with it. They don't remember that. They think, oh, I'm given money, I'm lucky. I therefore must get more money because that's the only thing they understand. This is deep ignorance, isn't it?
It is, and it's actually been articulated by many of our great writers. Are you familiar with Elias Canetti? who wrote Crowds and
You know
Power.
more writers that I have never heard of.
Well, I don't know. Crowds and Power. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1960, I think, or maybe it was 63, I forget. But the point was, Crowds and Power. See, I was a, University of Pittsburgh German student, and I was reading all this stuff. Um, it talks about the increase, this kind of madness that seizes a member of the crowd, and the kind of amplification wave of increase that all of the people around that person also need to be a part of and to push forward and have a head man doing these things, of course, and sociological speaking. I'm just firing off the cuff because of what you inspire in me when I'm thinking about that. And when you were talking earlier about how it's getting better, I got two references there. One is David Gantz, who hosts the Grateful Dead Hour, and he has a song himself that called well, I forget what it's called exactly, but the lyric in it is, "It's going to get worse before it gets better," repeated several times, "but I know it's going to get better." And it's a very uplifting song. He does an awful lot of things. He does a live stream like almost every day. And he'd been doing it since the pandemic because he needed to pay his bills, right? So he got a little crowd of people that tune into him every day practically to listen to his tunes and give him requests. And I've done it myself for a while and gotten out of the habit, but I've had him as a guest here. And the other thing was Steven Pinker. You familiar with him? He wrote
Mhm.
The Language Instinct, which was the first thing I read of his. But then he fairly recently wrote one called The Better Angels of Our Nature, about how violence is actually trending down. And it's about 800 pages long of statistics proving this.
Yeah,
So the better
definitely. We no
angels.
longer think that it's absolutely normal for someone to put his enemy into a box or trunk and then sit on the trunk and watch him scream.
Yeah.
It's not considered normal, but in the 1400s, it was pretty common.
What with the
Or that
torture?
we no longer torture people in exactly the same way we do torture people. It is getting better. At the
Yeah,
same time, I'm not going to call it evil. I'm calling it ignorance. I
I
want
like
to
that.
say something about this wave of energy that goes along like a comet's tail behind a charismatic leader,
Hmm.
how we're carried on other people's energy. And in a certain way, you can see that all of this that we're talking about is merely energy. And sometimes it's harmonious
Mm,
and people are in harmony, and sometimes it's in opposition and we're crossing each other and feeling more and more uncomfortable. And if our task is to love more deeply and to enjoy this world that is so brief, we're only here for a blink of an eye.
right.
And and if we're to experience every moment of it, then being in confluence with other people's harmony is a piece of it.
Yes.
Unless we're caught like a mob and we're being pulled a direction we don't want to go, then you have to take your energy out of that river. You're going to get hurt, badly hurt. But
Possibly.
I think this whole thing is about, well, it's about too much to be able to express in English, where we have nothing but nouns, and we don't have enough verbs. We don't have enough descriptive words for the mystical moments of life. And yet those are what we're seeking all the time. I'm
Yeah.
not able to express it either. I give readings I just came off of giving a reading to a man in Italy.
Okay.
And we were talking about much of this. His partner was abused as a child. Now that's
Mm.
right there, something that shouldn't happen. We don't you your heart curls up when you think, how could anybody do this to little children? And yet it's very, very, very common.
Yes. I was just talking yesterday to a woman whose memoir is called I'm Gonna Tell. And she was abused by her uncle, who was a doctor as well, her doctor.
Yeah,
And
that's it.
she did tell finally, but it took, I guess that was out about 2001. And hopefully I'll be able to have her on the show to talk that up a bit because I think that that's something we got to talk about it. Whether we have too many nouns
Have
or
to
not, we
talk.
need to actually have the conversation and let people have their voice.
And what does it mean that the Epstein papers are coming out, and the only people who are being called on it are in Europe? Our own our own system is protecting
Right, right.
the man. Of
Hmm.
course, I look at it, one part of me looks at it, how, and thinks, what is the matter with men? I, it's mostly men who are doing this to 13-year-old children or 10-year-old children.
It's rather horrific,
It's,
and I think I know what the answer is to a large extent. It's that hormonal drive in men, and also that they've got the old boy system pretty much beefed up to the point, and most of it comes out of insecurity, fear. You were talking
you
about being
think
driven by
you
fear.
think how that hormones are what drive men to poke their penis into any hole?
Practically, yeah. I've gotten over it myself, but it's because I'm older, and the levels of hormones
That's true.
drop over
Well,
time, and I'm
and
not
that's
as
why
aggressive, and I'm
men
more
become
reflective.
wonderful after 50. Yeah,
Well, when we get more reflective, and if we could train our young
yes.
men to be more reflective and less, and I was never that way in some ways because probably who my father and mother were trained me
Many,
different.
many, many men are not
But
that way at all.
right, I was much more, basically I had to be taken down by from behind if some woman was interested in me. That's sort of the story of my life. I didn't even realize it half the time. Men are so clueless. You're talking about ignorance, and I think a lot of it comes out of this pernicious ignorance in which to be ignorant, you have to be ignorant of the fact that you're ignorant. I think that's why Buddhism sees it as such a besetting evil to be that ignorance is really what it's about. You were steering away from the word evil towards ignorance. If we knew better, we'd do better, I think is what my little phrase I like to use. And you mentioned something else I wanted to touch on. And then I want to ask you a couple more questions about your recent journey, because I
Yeah.
haven't talked to you since before you left for France. I know a little bit about what happened in the Channel and on the way to Paris. But we are brief flashes on the surface of eternity. And I think we ought to cherish each other and treat each other well and remind ourselves this is a temp job. It's one of my favorite lines is
Mm,
this life here is a temp job.
that's right.
And
The
trying to
booklet.
be a good ancestor. I don't have any children of my own, but I try to send a kid to Camp Winter Rainbow every year, which is Wavy Gravy's performing arts camp out in California. I don't know if it does any good or not, but I think you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Um,
Yeah.
so back to your trip. I know you went to Egypt on your own after visiting your sister in
Oh
France. Is
no,
that
not
right?
on my own. I
Oh,
was with a
you're on a
tour
tour. Okay.
of
Well, tell me, how was it?
my daughter, and it was fabulous.
Yeah.
It was really, in very many ways, life-changing for me
Okay.
because there I was looking at objects that were made 10,000 years ago,
Mm,
5,000 years ago. 5,000 years ago is only 3,000 BC.
correct.
When the Sphinx was already 2,000 years old and no one knew who built it. So now you're back to 3, 4, 5,000. And then you can look at an object that was made in 10,000 BC.
Yeah.
So that's 12,000 years ago. Here's this, it was a mask that I was looking at, had eyes and nose holes and a mouth, and it was a very primitive
Mm.
portrait of somebody in that time, a portrait that might have been done by a little child.
Huh.
And then the Nile River is itself a living, breathing entity. It's just an astounding river. And I came away with this sense of all of these people struggling to liking life so much that they wanted more of it. So they'll mummify themselves and in the effort to have it in the next world. And my sense of how appropriate it is to die without even a marker for your grave.
Hmm.
Now, there was a time you were talking about the denial of death. There was a time when I thought, I will write an immortal book.
I'm sure you've done several.
Yeah, right. I'm about 12 years old at the time.
Okay.
And I'm aware of the immortal books of the Iliad and the Odyssey
Mhm.
and much later books that are just so wonderful. And I thought, yeah, then your name will ring down the corridors of time.
Oh, interesting.
But you see, now I think how appropriate it is to disappear.
Hmm.
I had a little moment. You used this wonderful term, Hal, a flash of light, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
And that's what we are. We're flashes of light. We're beings of light. Our aura is is all around us and affecting other people. And then that goes when we die, goes somewhere. We don't know where, though we have glimpses that we know a little bit. It doesn't disappear, and consciousness doesn't disappear. I think the trip to Egypt was extraordinary in giving me such a sense of history,
Yeah.
such a sense of this rolling of time on and on and on. And those people too lived when their sons were killed in war that they didn't want, or their daughters married people and were abused in ways they would not have wanted.
Right.
It was a time of famine and of feast. Some years the Nile didn't rise far enough.
Right.
And and they had great need for 5,700 gods. You never knew when a
Yes.
god was on your side or not. So they had a lot of gods. And we don't have so many gods anymore. Now people think they're doing it by themselves. And that's also wrong. We're wandering all over the world. Let me bring us back to
Okay. I was
angels.
about to go to ensemble performance because that's where you really get a lot of strength from when it's a group doing things in harmony and everybody's strength is brought to the table. But please, where were you going to go?
No, that's great. We can do that. I was going to go back to the fact that it's very difficult to be a human, and
Hmm.
that's why we have angels helping us. And they help us all the time, and we either notice it or don't notice it. And you can ask for help. All you have to do is ask help,
Oh, lovely.
and they're there. right away, they're there instantly. Help. Lots of times we don't ask for help, so they step back. You have free will. Do it yourself. You want to do it yourself.
You're
They,
familiar with that painting series of the angel. I can't remember the name of the painter, but it's the Ages of Life, the four paintings in the National
oh,
Gallery of Art.
Coles, yeah.
Cole,
Um,
Thomas Cole.
Thomas Cole. Yeah, I am indeed. And it's exactly like that. And
Yeah,
then
and it's
you get to the
fascinating.
end of your life and it suddenly makes sense.
Mhm.
And this is why I wrote the book, The Wonder and Happiness of Being Old, because when you're old, you have such a long distance view of what this is about, your life and other people's lives and what we're doing.
Right.
It not only makes sense, it's so gorgeous. Anyway,
And that's lovely. And it reminds me of Carl Jung's, his death experience when he had his heart attack and he was taken up towards an asteroid or something, is looking down at the whole expanse of Europe and Asia. Are you familiar with that
no,
sequence?
no. And what did he see?
It was in Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. Well, he just was there, and then his doctor's Ka, or whatever he called it, is like his spirit, came up and said there had been a protest raised on Earth, and he was to return, and he didn't want to go back to the world of the boxes, is the way that Jung said
Yeah.
it.
Mhm.
Yeah, so and he was very depressed after that, and I think that was in the 40s, and then he wrote Answer to Job in like 52, and then he passes away in
Had
61
more,
in June.
he had more work to do.
Right, and his, correspondence with Bill Wilson of Alcoholics Anonymous is there in 1961 for us to look back at, where he's talking about spiritus contra spiritum as the helpful formula in Latin. You're talking about the number of gods, and one of the things I do with Harrowings when I'm writing is I quite often will have it generate a little image, and I'll give it the, text to generate, and I'm always looking for it to generate what I believe is my anima, Eris, the goddess of chaos, the uninvited one at the party, right? Never
Yeah,
gets invited, rolls that golden apple into the party, that says to the fairest, and
yeah.
then the goddesses fight over that, and you end up with the Trojan Wars.
Well,
Because yeah, go ahead.
that's as good an explanation as any, isn't it?
I don't
And
know.
she has just rolled her golden apple down and they make a war with Iran.
And it's
It's
all because she was snubbed.
well, it
Yeah, anyway, you never
is.
know. You never know what the feminine energy is going to do. And like I think that's one of the things you and I were talking about is that, women get treated one way, men get treated another way in our culture, and we've got to get more mature. We've got to get to the point where we raise our young men to respect women. One of the things I was doing recently was writing, and what did I call it? Honestly speaking, or speaking up, something like that. I was trying to be honest, and I was, how they swear you in and say you're going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And the truth is, I don't know. I just know how things seem to me. I have my perspective, and I could be wrong. So I'm very uncertain about many things. I go back to Robert Anton Wilson, another writer who you might enjoy. I don't know if you know him already. But one of the things he said is he didn't believe anything, but he had many suspicions. And so that's what we do. We look at the world we're in, and we are beings of love and light. We want what's best for our children and those who have come, and we want to be good stewards of the legacies of those who come before. I know that your background is really fascinating. I could talk to you for hours, but I do want to be respectful of your time. So give you the last 5, 10 minutes here to
Okay.
bring it wherever you want to go.
Take it wherever I want to go.
Yeah, what
I'll
really
give you an
message are you
Arthur
trying to?
C. Clarke quote.
Mm,
Arthur C. Clarke, who
yeah.
is one of my heroes, and he said, there are only two possibilities. Either we are alone in the universe or we're not. Both is terrifying. And I think that's true. I do not myself believe in aliens. But I know people who have seen them
Hmm.
and not seen aliens, but seen their spaceships. And they all seem to agree on what the spaceship looked like and how it folded its wings and shot off in seconds
Hmm.
in an unusual pattern. How it was spinning before, long cigar shaped, and
Hmm.
looking at them. and the two stories that I'm thinking of, one was a pilot going across the Pacific in a sat plane, which had to fly. We have to keep them in the air all the time.
Right.
And everybody in that plane saw this alien plane. And the other one was a man who was sunbathing nude high up in the highlands of New Mexico in the mountains. And he looked up and there was a ship right on top of him looking down. He covered himself in first instinct. And and then he thought, oh, they see I see him. At which point the ship folded in on itself and vanished. And I
Amazing.
have every reason to believe both of them. But I've never seen them myself, so I have to trust only in the angels that I have seen or whose evidence I have seen.
Hmm. Did you see the sequel to Wings of Desire ever? It was called Far Away So Close.
I never saw it, but I think
Mhm.
Wim Wenders is fabulous.
He got Mikhail Gorbachev to do the opening scene because this was the Wings of Desire was before the fall of the wall.
Is it on Netflix? Can I pull it up on Netflix?
Possibly. I have it on DVD. It might be. I haven't looked for it in a long time, but it's done after the fall of the wall. The sequel is. So
Mhm.
Mikhail Gorbachev is doing some signing of some papers, and Cassiel the Angel, played by Otto Sanders, is over him, listening to him before
Mhm.
Cassiel himself falls in this one. In the first one, it was Bruno Ganz's character, the angel Damiel, and in the sequel, Damiel is running a pizzeria called Casa dell'Angelo um,
Mhm.
with his wife, the trapeze artist, of course.
Yes,
What's very sad to me,
I'll try and get it. I'll try and get it.
even though you say there is no death, it is kind of sad to me that Sylvie, the actress who played the trapeze artist, died at like 40 something from a heart attack. But
Why is it? Why?
why did she die? From a heart
No,
attack?
why is it tragic?
It felt tragic. I mean, there's such short life. I think it's nice to have a long life, but maybe I'm biased. And I'm only 63 here, but you're coming along too. So, and still working, getting a new book out. Do you have a working title for your new book, by the way? I'm
No,
sorry,
no,
jumping
not yet.
around.
Not yet. I'm
I
just
mean, hmm,
thinking about it at this point.
okay.
Um, I have so much going on, I don't have time to write it yet.
Isn't that
But,
amazing?
but it's, um, well, I lost my thought. I
I'm
lost
sorry.
my thought.
It was probably along the lines of how it's not really tragic that someone dies.
Oh, yes, it's not tragic when someone dies because then they go back to pure spirit. I had
Hmm.
my brother come back and he died
Hmm.
a few years ago, and I was giving my horse a reading from an animal communicator. The animal communicator was in California. I was in Massachusetts. The horse was in her pasture in Massachusetts, but not next to me. And we did a reading, which I must say changed her as I had hoped, and she became much quieter and more respectful.
Oh, lovely.
And at the end of this reading, the animal communicator said, did you have a brother who died?
Hmm.
And suddenly my brother was right there in front of me, not in
Wow.
California, not with a horse, in front of me. And he said, "This is terrific." He was surrounded by golden light. He was only
Uh,
from the waist up. And then he said something which I had said 2 weeks earlier to my sister. And I had said, "I'm the psychic. I'm envious. He's come back to so many people. He hasn't come back to me." And, and he said, "I don't know why you're envious," using my exact word. "I'm with you all the time.
that's
I
so
help
beautiful.
you."
And that is a great note to end on. I'm going to hit the pause button here.